The hearse carrying Princess Diana is 5 minutes away from a village, Harlestone Village. Correspondent Bruce Morton reports from there.
Harlestone is the kind of village poets write about, or travel agents. Old as time, the paperwork goes back to the Norman Conquest. Houses of good local sandstone, flowers everywhere, English roses. The village hasn't changed much since Diana Spencer, as she was then, was a girl here. Mike Buller remembers she used to come to the local cricket matches. Her father, the Earl, the big landowner hereabouts, was one of the players.
And during not such an interesting time of the match, Lady Diana said to Nigel, do you like polo? And with tongue-in-cheek, he said, no, I don't like mince. Well, you may know what I mean, but you know what I mean.
They didn't see her so much later on, of course. School, London, marriage. Postmaster Dave Masters says they were all happy when she married, and of course they all mourn now.
Rather very saddened, very saddened. I mean, she was a leader. She was so warm, so loving. She was a person, she didn't have to go back and ask people, am I doing right? If she thought it wanted doing, she'd go and do it. And I think that's why she got so much respect throughout the world.
Some of the villagers will stand here and watch the funeral cortege go by. Some may be scared off by the media, here in force with a gaggle of trucks and towers and people. The Spencer house, Althorpe, is just a mile or so down the road. Gates closed, but crowds outside. They came, of course, to bring flowers, mounds of flowers, as at Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace. Mounds of flowers and notes, and at one point, a little quiet music from two young men in school uniforms. So villagers and visitors mingle, some with memories, all in sadness. The village glows in late summer beauty, but one of its golden girls is coming home now. One of its roses faded much too soon. This is the village now. This is Harlestone, and you can see people waiting here. Some of them have been here for hours, children, families, many of them wearing those black ribbons of mourning, which so many people in Britain have been wearing this past week. We think, we don't know for sure, that the funeral cortege is due here fairly soon, perhaps 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, no one is quite sure. Plenty of police here. For a time, more ambulance volunteers than crowds, although that balance has shifted a little as more people have come. Many, of course, since the service ended, came down to pay their last respects and say goodbye. We have a couple of people here who've been waiting a while. If I could get you, two of you sort of facing William's camera. This is Jane and Dave Ali Bedworth.
Jan.
Tell me a little about why you came.
Oh, I mean, you can't miss this. You couldn't miss it.
Why
It just
not?
draws you. It just draws you.
Just got a feeling that
Even
you've got to
though-
be here.
Even though we've never actually met her, she just draws you. That's how I feel.
And you, sir?
Well, it's something you couldn't miss. You just couldn't. You know, it's one historic thing in your life. She's done so many good things for everybody, rich, poor, beggars, whatever.
It's like you feel.
And I think
Do you live here in the village?
no, we live in Bedworth.
Well, that's next door.
Yeah, it's not
It's
far
not
away.
far.
Did you know her? Did you see her at all as she was growing up?
We've seen her
We've just watched her all on the telly.
TV,
and
things like. We've not actually met
watched
her
her.
personally, but she's just a wonderful person. Well, she was a wonderful person.
A lot of people who never met her feel as if they knew
Yeah,
her.
that's
Yeah.
Someone this week
exactly.
said she was a personal princess.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's like her friend.
Yeah. She
nothing
didn't
to
stop
do-
for anything, did she? She let no one get in her way.
She wanted to. She
So
did what she wanted to do.
So she'd got like this inner strength to carry on regardless what everybody was saying, telling her to do, telling her not what to do. She did it. She'd got that strength.
Did you watch the service?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, watched it since 7 o'clock this morning.
What are you going to remember?
I think basically the crowds, the amount of people that followed her, respected her, and the things that she done, and she'll still live on in our memories for years and years to come.
I know where I'll remember. Prince Harry, Prince William, walking behind the coffin. How nice.
It's all right.
That was lovely. And nobody come in their way. That was smashing, weren't it? No trouble, nothing. It's lovely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
We are, you can see down the same road I'm looking at. We're all still waiting for the cortege. We all think that it's due sort of any minute now. There haven't been any other cars come through for a time, which is probably a good sign. But at the moment, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens here. We have another guest here. Sir, could you tell me your name, please, first, and come in so that William can see you?
John Chambers.
Mr. Chambers, why are you here today?
Well, just out of respect, really, you know. Just, I'm a local lad, really. I'm just coming from respect.
Did you
And
have
more
any
respect.
sense of her as a neighbor? Do you ever see her, wandering through the village?
No, not really, no, because I work sort of like out of town most of the time, you know. Just like staying away, and I just thought it appropriate that I just pay her my respects, you know.
What will you remember about her? A lot of people seem to feel they knew her somehow.
Well, I just think the whole world virtually knew her, really, you know. She's just one of those ladies, wasn't she, really? You know, she was everybody's friend, no one's enemy, really. That was it. Words can't express how sort of lady she was.
More of a royal or more of a regular person? Or?
More of a regular person, I would have thought, yeah, most definitely, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Bernie, we're here. We still think sort of any minute now, but it's hard to know. Let me just, William, if you can come with me down here. Ma'am, could we just ask you for a minute why you wanted to come out and be on this roadside?
Just really to honour and to grieve and pay our last respects, really, on such a special day. It's her day and it's our last chance to say goodbye, really.
What will you particularly remember about her, ma'am?
I remember her humanity and her beauty, but not beauty as simplicity, but beauty as a person, from her inner strength and her kindness to everybody. And I think more than anything, she touched everybody's hearts, everybody.
I keep running into people. I'm a visitor here, obviously. Who it's not that they knew her, but they feel as if they knew her somehow.
I think she had a magical quality whereby she really could touch everybody. Nobody ever had to really be her or touch next to her, but she reached all humanity, which I think a lot is missing in the world nowadays, but she had that ability to do that, to reach out to people, no matter where they were from, what colour, what class, what creed, what religion, everything. She just crossed all barriers to touch everybody's hearts, and that's a very, very special quality that nobody will ever forget.
Who's your young friend?
This is my lovely friend's son, Stephen.
What made you want to come out?
I didn't want to miss this occasion. Just come and see this.
Pretty special lady?
Yeah.
And it's very,
Very
special for
special.
him because he lives in France, he's educated in France, so he didn't want to miss it for the world. He goes back to France to school tomorrow with his brother and sister who are just over the road, and he just really wanted to come today to pay his respects. It's the last thing he wanted to do while he was in England, he said, and I think that's very special, and that came from his heart this morning.
Did you watch the service?
Yes, I did, and we also recorded what we missed because we travelled quite a distance.
What will you take away from it?
I think take away from it that she has been paid great respects, and take away from it the last moments we can treasure of paying our respects. I don't know what there is to take away in real honesty of words, because there's nothing to say. She'll be so greatly missed and such a great loss that I really can't think of words to express it. It's very, very sad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We are, Bernie, with you and with our viewers, still waiting for the cortege, which we think is due. I seem to keep saying this, but we do think this. We think it's due sort of any minute now. But in the meantime, there's some more people whose views we can perhaps share about all this. Come in, please, so that William can see you a little. Tell me your name first.
Mark Hundle.
Why are you here?
Basically to show my last respects and, say goodbye to this great lady.
Why great? I mean, everyone has said that, but tell me what she meant to you.
Well, I mean, it's a shame that it's taken her death to make us all realise she's a great person, but, I mean, she's done a hell of a lot, just bringing all of the charities that she's worked for to the forefront of people's minds.
What's your name, please?
Matthew Kendall.
And what do you remember? What brought you out to pay respects here?
For the same reasons, and she's great, and wanted to show that it was worth it what she was doing, that she has got support, and that somebody else can carry on for where she's left off.
What will you remember about her?
She wasn't afraid of anything, really, anybody. It's just the way she did things regardless. It's just a shame that the way she ended, really.
And you, sir?
Stephen Cad, there's a lesson to be learned from all this. So if we just carry on the work that she started, make sure it keeps on.
What do you think her legacy is? I mean, 10 years from now, when somebody says Princess Diana, what are you going to remember?
The work she did and how brave she was through everything, all the down parts she had, but so many high points to her life.
Love.
Just remember those, yeah. So much love.
Love.
Like?
Love.
All
Love
love she
for
gave
all.
to the world,
Yeah.
so she really helped us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And we continue to wait. The village continues to wait. The crowd, which you see along these barricades, continues to wait. And we have asked one more gentleman here to share his thoughts with us. Sir, could you come in a little, thank you, and tell me your name, please?
Saad Abbas.
Why did you want to come out and say goodbye?
Well, it's just to remember her for the work she's done for everybody, for the poor, for the rich, for everybody. She's helped everyone, and I think this is why we've got a lot of people out there trying to express their feelings and to say thank you in their own way. And this is really why I'm out here.
What was it she had, do you think? I mean, people feel more warmly about her than any of the royal family, I think, than anybody I've known in Britain over the years.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the way she communicates with people. She's got the ability to bring herself down to whatever level she wants and go up to whatever level she wants. So it's her ability to communicate with people and understand their needs and their feelings.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bernie, I hate to sound like a broken record, but any minute now.
Bruce, repetition of any kind on a day like this is completely understandable, completely forgivable. I should report that Prince Charles and Princes William and Harry arrived a short while ago. They will be the only royals attending the private interment. Bruce, listening to the citizens you've talked to, one hears again and again the basic message that the people knew something Buckingham Palace did not.
Well, I think that's right. I think that's been the whole message of this past week. There was just a fusillade a couple of days ago in the tabloid press. Where is the Queen? Why isn't the flag at half-mast, which is how they say it here, not half-staffed the way we did. Headline after headline after headline, and finally, of course, the royal family got the message. The Queen went on television. The flag flew at half-mast at Buckingham Palace today during the service. But there was most of this week, people have been saying, we know what we lost. Why don't the royals get it?
And there was one moment where, when the funeral cortege passed Buckingham Palace and Queen Elizabeth was leading the royals, standing out there in front of the gates, the Queen of England bowed her head. Extraordinary.
Well, this whole week has been extraordinary. When the Queen made an appearance yesterday, and a little girl came up and handed her some flowers, and the Queen said, you want me to put them, with all the other flowers? And the little girl said, no, these are for you. And the Queen, reporters who were there said, was surprised. Said, really? These are for me? I think it's an odd thing to say about a 71-year-old monarch, but I think this has been a learning experience for the royal family. Things have changed. People react differently from the way they did when Elizabeth became Queen, when Charles even became Prince of Wales. It's just a different time.
And certainly, buttressing what you've just said, was to see Queen Elizabeth on the balcony at Buckingham Palace addressing the nation, using a teleprompter with the crowds behind her down below.
Yeah, I think that's... It says something for the Queen, I think you have to say, that at 71 you can plunge into this new medium. She didn't want to tape it. She didn't want the safety of that. She wanted to be live, and she was. And she did the right thing. The press came around. The headlines the next day were all positive. The press likes to like the royals, basically, and that gave them a chance to.
Speaking just a moment about the interment, of course, it will be strictly private. Originally, we were reporting, as was the indicated plan, that Princess Diana would be laid to rest in the family vault at St. Mary's Chapel Check me on that. I think I'm getting the title of the church wrong.
Well, they changed the plan because the church is, I think I have the title right, but the church is in fact not in the estate. It's a church that's used by other people, and they were afraid that it would turn into some sort of Diana shrine, that the regular worship would be interfered with. So she's being buried instead, Bernie, on the estate, on a little island in a little lake. It's, I don't remember, a 12, 15 acre estate, something like that. And the theory is that that will be private. There'll be no danger of some sort of cult flowering up around it. It will be open to the public some weeks of the year, as the estate is at present. But more than anything else, the spokesmen have been saying, it will give the sons a chance to worship in private, come there whenever they want, as often as they want, and think about their mother. And everybody seemed to think that was a pretty good idea.
An excellent idea. Reuters is reporting on some of the things observed inside Westminster Abbey. Reuters says that 12-year-old Harry buried his head in his hands and sobbed as singer Elton John, alone at that grand piano, sang, "Your candle burned out long before you ever will." And William, Diana's 15-year-old son, born to be king, wept as John sang, "All our words cannot express the joy you brought us through the years."
Well, it must be very hard for the boys. You know, they're not grown-ups. They've had no preparation for this sort of thing. They've had extraordinarily tumultuous lives so far. Parents getting divorced, one thing and another. This has just got to be an enormously sad and tough week for them. We have another guest here. Tell me your name, ma'am.
Jill Williams.
What brought you out on this fairly sunny afternoon?
I arrived last evening, actually. It took us 3 hours to get here from the south of England, and we felt we wanted to come to Diana's hometown to pay our last respects.
What made her so special to you? She seems to have been special to everyone. But,
yeah, she's special to everyone, and she's special to me. She does so much good all around the world, not just in this country. She's a very special lady.
Did you feel, because so many people seem to, as if you knew her? I don't mean that you did, but...
Yeah, I felt, when I heard the news, I felt as though I'd lost a really good friend, although I'd never met her. And I think a lot of people feel the same as me.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, Bernie, the wait here continues. The little crowd has thickened some in the last 15 or 20 minutes. And the cortege is on its way.
Bruce, 3 years ago, Princess Diana attended the launch of the Child Bereavement Trust. And in this week's The Express, London newspaper, founder patron Julia Samuel and director Jenny Thomas, who became friends with the princess, found themselves giving advice which they hope will help her sons William and Harry. And Jenny Thomas is with us here in our London studio. I was struck by a number of things you've said in this piece. At one point you wrote that grieving is the process through which we make real within us the event that has taken place outside us. And this last paragraph, Ms. Thomas, if you will, the bereaved children move on to the next day, week, month, year. While children fill their lives in many areas, the empty space left by the parent who has died is never filled. The space is forever.
That's right.
What were you thinking as you watched the young princes walking behind their mother's coffin in the funeral cortege?
I found it deeply moving. I thought it was a very great tribute to her. I know that one of the things she'd said was just how proud she was of her boys and just how much she loved them. And I think it would have been heartbreaking for her to have been there and to have known how much sadness there was. And I thought they behaved in a way that was very appropriate for two young men having to do something so difficult.
Were you relieved to see them behind the coffin? I have in mind you're saying that children need to be involved in the funeral.
Very much so. I mean, I work with families where children sometimes are not allowed to be involved. They aren't given any choices. They don't... Parents somehow feel that if they don't tell them about it, they'll protect them, and if they protect them, that the children will be better. better off, and that isn't the case. Lots of the children I see, lots of the teenagers, have deep regrets about not being included. So I was particularly pleased that William and Harry were included in every way possible, and I think that that was very important. It's what I was saying in the article about making real what's outside within us. They needed to see a coffin, they needed to walk behind it and to pay their respects. And the service itself said so much about Diana that will help them enormously in making real within them this terrible tragedy. It takes a long time to sink in that she really has died, and I doubt whether it's fully sunk in even now.
I read your piece 3 times Wednesday night, and I was struck when you said they are often left with a sense of having been robbed.
That's right. There's an enormous feeling of robbery and grief, and the Latin, the word grief comes from the Latin to rob, and people seldom realise just how robbed you feel. And it's very important to recognise that there are lots of different emotions and that nobody ever feels them at exactly the same time, and none of us are the same. And children don't feel exactly the same as each other either. There's no right way to grieve, and people will gradually get in touch with the different feelings that there are. One of the things that we so wanted in the charity that we founded, Julia, Samuel and myself, was to help people to recognise the importance of grief, to see that it's really a very important part of our lives when we lose someone precious, to grieve for them. And the Princess of Wales came to our launch and she fully supported the work of the charity, and never in a million years did we dream that she would be the person that we would all be learning about grief from, and particularly with children, her own 2 children.
Ms. Thomas, as I ask you this question, I want to report that the royal plane is about to leave for Balmoral, Scotland, and tomorrow there in Scotland, Prime Minister Tony Blair is expected to meet with Her Majesty. They're expected to have a luncheon. I just wanted to report that to our viewers, but I want to ask you, why is one of the most basic mistakes an adult can make in interacting with a grieving child is to ask that child to be brave or to act grown up?
That's right. I think it's one of the most unhelpful things to say you've done well to not show your feelings. But I also think we need to respect that children won't want to show their innermost feelings to the whole world. It's embarrassing, it's difficult to know, and you can't begin to show how you feel until you know how you feel. And those feelings can take a long time to come. And I think it isn't helpful to tell children how they ought to be. They need to be allowed to just be and never judge feelings. They're not right or wrong. They're just how you are at that particular time.
We know the stories about Princess Diana living in Kensington Palace with her 2 boys and intentionally putting on baseball caps on them and walking to the local McDonald's, having them queue like everyone else and having them pay and to wait. And juxtapose that with the stiff protocol of the monarchy. And then you have a 15-year-older and in a week, a 13-year-older trying to deal with that grief, yet trying to follow the dictates of protocol.
I think the 2 go quite well together, Bernard. I actually believe that what their mother gave them, what she taught them, what lots of their friends will continue to do, and certainly her family and the royal family have a real place in these boys' life and their upbringing. And they're used to protocol. It's how they were brought up. Princess Diana had no problem with it. She was very pleased that the boys had that side of their lives, but she also wanted them to have the broader side. And that's the part that we need to respect. How can they have that part of being out there in the world if we swarm around them all the time and don't give them any privacy? And that'll be even more important in the months and years of their grief. When they return to school, they will need to be with their friends, they need to be back, but they won't need the world looking at them. That's what will inhibit their grief. And if we care about the Princess of Wales children, that's what we need to do more than anything else, is give them space and time to get back into the world in whatever way they need to. We've recently made a video in the charity, and the Princess of Wales saw it this summer, and it's a video called Someone Died, It Happened to Me. It's about children talking about grief, and they say, every one of them, it helped when somebody listened, but they also needed privacy.
So there was resonance in what Queen Elizabeth said when she told the nation, and indeed the world, that the royal family was at Balmoral because they were very concerned about the young princes.
That's absolutely right. I was so pleased, and it was sad that the coverage of what the royals were doing was criticised, because it was so incredibly helpful to stay with those children in an environment they knew, to be able to go to church, which is what they do, it's what they're used to, and to be given time and space with their granny and grandpa, their loving father, their relatives, their cousins. All those people really matter to those boys, and that's what they needed to do, and I'm so pleased that that happened, because it's what enabled them to be where they were today. That was the rock beneath them. It feels really important that that happened.
Princess Diana's funeral cortege continues approaching Althorp. The world was watching Prince William, the world was watching Prince Harry as they walked behind their mother's coffin, and I know you were watching especially closely. We noticed William's head, the times I saw him, was bowed as he strode along. Occasionally, Prince Harry's head was raised, looking ahead, not looking around. What did you interpret as you saw them move?
Oh, I thought they were just so very real, so in touch with what was being expected of them. I don't know, I can't imagine how they were feeling, but I was very touched by the way William didn't look very different to how he always looks. He's inclined to keep his head down, and he is learning how to be in this world, and it takes a lot to go out there at 15 and have the world looking at you. I would think it was an immensely difficult task that he did for his mother. I found the most moving thing, I think, of the whole procession, those words "mummy" on the top of the coffin, with that very small, beautiful posy. I thought it said everything. They still need her. They need their mummy. And that's what we mustn't forget. They're not young adults. They're still children. Children that need a mummy. And we are seeing this enormously sad event that's touching their lives.
And you took immense heart when Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, vowed in his tribute to his sister that no one, and certainly not the paparazzi or the news media, would interfere with their development.
Yes, I felt it was an extremely deeply felt piece that he said. I am sure that there's a lot of anger and bitterness in how he feels, as there always is in grief. And I think that if something good can come out of it, which is that it can be directed onto the world respecting what he asked for, and his allegiance in a way to his sister, saying that he will make sure that his children, or their children, and the young princes don't have to put up with what their mother endured.
I'm impressed with your underscoring the importance of time. I'm mindful of this line that you wrote. It's important to reassure children that it's nothing they did that caused the death and nothing they could have done to prevent it.
That's a very important point, Bernard, because one of the things that children often feel is that in some way they were responsible, that maybe they could have made it different, or maybe it was just a thought they had. Children feel that their thoughts are very powerful, and it's a very normal, natural reaction for children and teenagers to think that if someone close to them dies, that in some way they contributed to that, especially when it's a sudden, terrible death like this. So it's important that children are reassured more and more time, well, many more times than once, that it was nothing to do with them, that they could not have made it any different. And certainly that the people they choose to trust to talk to actually do listen to them and say, you know, tell me about it, tell me about how you feel, and allow those children to talk about how they feel. It's a significant part of what all children need to do. There's a lot of blame and guilt and self-blame in the whole grieving process.
If you are just joining CNN's live coverage from Great Britain, we are listening to Jenny Thomas, the director of the Child Bereavement Trust. She shares duties with, among other colleagues, patron Julia Samuel. 3 years ago, Princess Diana attended the launch of the Child Bereavement Trust. We are looking at a picture from Harlestone Village in England, right next to Princess Diana's ancestral home. CNN's Bruce Morton is there, and they are awaiting the funeral cortege, and it will pass through this village as Princess Diana is borne homeward. Miss Thomas,
Hello.
I was struck by your saying that 1% of all children in Britain lose a parent through death. Any projection on figures, comparable figures in other industrialized countries? I don't know what the figures are in the United States, for example.
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't. I don't know that. One of the things that it's important to take on board with that statement is that statistic was taken in this country from people who are married, people who have had 3 children in the family. So if you have had 4 children in your family and you're not married, you are not in that statistic. So it's a much lower number of children in this country than what is really the true number. Many, many more thousands of children than 135,000 children are bereaved of a parent each year. And it's the very work of our charity, recognizing that people do need to take some notice and some care of children's grief, and that not to think children don't grieve, and to recognize that they do, and to make sure that they get the sort of support that this charity is all about. It's one of the reasons that we were set up, and it was certainly one of the reasons that the Princess of Wales supported us. So it's very, very important that that's taken into account when we look at children and grief.
May I ask you to think back 3 years ago when the Princess was there at the launch of the Child Bereavement Trust.
Yes.
What were some of the things she said? What were some of the things she worried aloud about?
Oh, she arrived in an unofficial capacity, looking absolutely lovely. She had wanted to come, and she wanted to be part of us, but not in an official way. And she'd come to support her great friend Julia Samuel, who they'd been friends for some years, and Julia was making a speech at the charity launch about her work at St Mary's Hospital, Paddington. St Mary's is where the Princess of Wales' sons were born, and Julia Samuel has a job there working as a counsellor for bereavement. And the Princess of Wales was very, very interested in understanding how our work in the hospital was developing. I work as a nurse, or worked then as a nurse on a special care baby unit. And we were talking about what it was like to lose a baby, to lose a child. She was particularly moved to hear that it was important to create memories. She was just very interested in everything that the charity was trying to do. And she asked me personally things about what had been the reasons I was doing what I was doing, and what did I find the most difficult part of my work. And she believed that nurses needed to be supported, and that was really nice. She asked me about who supported me and who cared for me when I'd been involved in something very difficult and very painful, particularly if I was seeing families where there was a child that had died. So she took a great interest, and I remember her touching my shoulder. I was bending down to put some slides into a carousel, and she put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Jenny, can I help? Is there anything I can do?" It was just a very natural lady that we're talking about, and she had a way with her that made you feel important and really understood too. I can see why everyone is so moved. It feels like somehow Diana held for us the vulnerability and the sort of honesty that we all have identified with, and the hurt and pain. I believe that somewhere too, that's where we're identifying with this princess.
And to show that they identify with Princess Diana, these Britons are craning, waiting patiently, as everyone in this country has waited throughout the week for this funeral today. This is Harlestone Village, next to thru, the Princess of Wales' ancestral home. There is a funeral cortege making its way towards Harlestone Village. CNN's Bruce Morton is there, and when we come back, we will continue this brief vigil as we await Diana's return home. We'll continue in a moment. CNN and correspondent Bruce Morton on the scene at Harlestone Village is awaiting the pass-through of the hearse bearing the coffin of Princess Diana as she moves on. We are talking with Jenny Thomas, the director of the Child Bereavement Trust. And you see the cortege continuing to move, continuing to get closer to Bruce Morton's position. I had a Londoner tell me a story about the London Taxi Drivers Fund for underprivileged children. And Ms. Thomas, one of the key officials in the Taxi Drivers Union said that he was on the street and Princess Diana was in a car. And
Here we are.
Okay, Bruce, I'll interrupt that story, and to you now.
We see an ambulance with its headlights on. We see other ambulances behind that, Bernie, and the information we've had is that there are 3 or 4 ambulances, then there are some police, and then at some point, the hearse itself. Now, that's a police van just going by that you see. We can go back to you and go back to your story and wait for the hearse, I guess. I just jumped when I saw vehicles.
No, I think I'd much rather stay with you, Bruce, and this story can wait.
Well, that's what people have been doing here. Of course, this is, I guess we said before, but this is really the last village before the Spencer estate. And of course, all the services there will be private. That's closed. The gates have been closed for some days now. Flowers accumulating in front of them. And this is really the last place in England where people will have a chance to say goodbye when the hearse goes past. So it's not a huge crowd, but it's a very patient crowd. Many of these people have been out here 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. It's not the kind of crush that you had in front of the London palaces, but there are a lot of people from around here who, if they didn't know her, kind of felt as if they did and thought they ought to come out this one last time and say goodbye. Here, as everywhere else, Bernie, it's just extraordinary the way people talk about this woman, because they all talk about her, even if they only know her from the television and the newspapers, as if she were a friend. I don't recall, and you and I have covered lots of public figures, anybody else about whom that was true to this degree. There's just an extraordinary sense of personality, sense of this was someone I knew about Diana, and I can't think of a parallel.
Bruce, you've inspired me to continue telling these stories, and I'll tell them very, very quickly. First of all, David Coupler is a London taxi driver, and he was telling me about being in traffic, looking out to his left, and there's Princess Diana in the car behind the wheel. "Hello, ma'am." The princess responds, "Hello, how are you today? How's the traffic?" That's Princess Diana in traffic with a fellow Briton asking this taxi driver, "How's the traffic?" And he says, "Not bad." And then this other story from another London taxi driver, Jerry Dunn. I was about to tell it. He saw Princess Diana in traffic. He had this pamphlet. He held up the pamphlet, and it announced that the Taxi Drivers Fund for Underprivileged Children was going to have an affair. And Mr. Dunn asked the princess, "Will you come?" And she shouted, "Send it to the palace." He mailed the pamphlet to the palace and forgot about it. Well, at this affair, guess who showed up? And Jerry Dunn says she showed up with no press. The children were not expecting her, and she spent 2 hours there. And he said he was most moved by this. There was a blind child in a wheelchair, and Princess Diana went over to this blind child, and the child said, Are you a real princess? Princess Diana. Yes. Can I touch you? Yes. That's the end of those two stories. They were told me about 3 days ago, and this is my first opportunity to share them with you.
Well, Bernie, there's a line from an old Broadway musical that goes, a genuine princess is extremely rare. And Diana, according to everybody you talked to, was a genuine princess.
And Jenny Thomas of the Child Bereavement Trust, I thought about that instance there at the charity where she showed up for 2 hours, and you said she made you feel important.
That's right, she did. She took such interest. She actually wanted to know what we were doing, why it mattered. It wasn't just a glamorous lady turning up and being there. Why she was there was she wanted to know what it meant to have to care for grieving families. And she particularly wanted to support her friend Julia, who she'd listened, apparently the day before, she'd listened to the speech, and she wanted to be there just to give her the strength to stand up in front of people and do it. And it made our charity very important because there were some beautiful photographs of her that hit the headlines, and it made a big difference to us. It's been very nice to have her there, albeit behind the scenes, but very supportive and interested, and took an interest. We sent her the videos that we made, and she thought they'd help a lot of people. So, yeah, in a way, she had a special way of connecting with what you were doing and making what you felt you were doing feel like it mattered. And I think that's very rare.
Jenny Thomas, you have your finger on the pulse of your fellow citizens. What do you think Princess Diana will do? How will she affect the whole attitude about charity in Great Britain?
Oh, I think it's going to make a great big difference, Bernard, to the way people feel about charity. She believed that it was important to look at the different areas where people were not being cared for. And I hope that we will become a more humanitarian Britain, that we will realize that the small touches, the putting your arm around somebody, the giving time to somebody, asking them how they are, and being available to listen to their reply. If she lives on, that's how she'll live on. She'll live on in helping all of us to have fun, but also recognize that there are an awful lot of people out there who are not able to have fun, and to give part of our lives to making their life a bit more enjoyable.
Prince Charles and his sons, Prince William, Prince Harry, are on the family estate there at Thru. They arrived some time ago, and as correspondent Bruce Morton indicated, this is going to be a most private interment, which is very, very understandable. And we're talking with Jenny Thomas, the director of the Child Bereavement Trust. Bruce Morton, along the road there in Harlestone Village, is waiting, as are the citizens of this village, for the drive-through of the Princess Hearse, which is bearing her home to the family estate. We were told that Queen Elizabeth left on the royal airplane from London, flying back to Balmoral Castle. We also know that British Foreign Minister Tony Blair will be going up there, and that he will be having lunch with Her Majesty tomorrow. It has been a beautiful day here in London, the capital of this great nation. White clouds now coming in over the city, but it has been sunny, no rain. It was misty yesterday. The pavements, the streets were a bit wet, but that did not deter the hundreds of thousands of people who began streaming into London days ago upon hearing the tragic news from Paris. Many people overnighted in sleeping bags. Police authorities were very concerned for their well-being. The eeriest thing for me...
Now, Bernie, we see some police motorcycles coming. I can't make out a hearse behind them, but I'm told it's there. Yes, now we see the hearse. Well, you have seen Princess Diana's hearse go by, the funeral cortege go by. People here applauded, as you heard. People here threw flowers. People here, some aloud and some in silence, said goodbye. If I could talk to you, ma'am, we talked to you before. Are you glad you came?
I'm very, very pleased I came. I think in a million lifetimes, nothing could ever touch the grief of a nation of today of losing her. And to pay our respects is the best thing we could ever do for her. She was a true princess.
You came?
Yeah, very glad.
Why?
Because I enjoyed. It's really sad watching a thing like this, isn't it? Because
Thank you very much. Bernie, back to you.
Thank you, Bruce. We will return to England in just a moment.